Hi, everybody. Dr. Stu Hoffman back with you again today with another live event from ChiroSecure. Today, I'm actually honored to have Shawn Steele, who I've gotten to know over the last few years. He's a personal injury attorney in California, but he does so much more than personal injury. If you practice in California, I can't imagine you wouldn't know Shawn, and so many of you would be utilizing Shawn because he's a chiropractic friendly attorney. And more than that, he's an advocate for chiropractic. He's practiced law since 1978, and he's been defending all kinds of alternative medicine, and that includes us as chiropractors. Shawn has authored over 40 articles and different chapters in books regarding personal injury, alternative medicine, and the law. But he's also a frequent lecturer. And he does this for doctors for licensure renewal throughout California. And he's also taught, in fact, he bumped me off this last year teaching ethics and jurisprudence to doctors. And he does it also at Cleveland Chiropractic College and has been since 1991. Over the years, he's achieved a numerous amount of verdicts that are 6 and 7 figures. And because of all of this, Shawn has gained such an incredible reputation in the chiropractic world. And in fact, before we started this today, we were just talking about one of the things, since we talk so much about stroke cases and the Katie May stroke issue. He's been intimately involved in this as well. So he's everywhere chiropractic. And I just want to welcome him to our broadcast and let you know that he's going to talk about how to manage and evaluate personal injury claims and ensure your reimbursement. And why are we doing this today? I'm going to tell you, I get so many different phone calls from all of you out there for so many different reasons, and they're not always that someone's threatening to sue me or they are suing me or there's a board complaint or this and that. You call me for the darndest reasons, but so many of you call me about your personal injury cases that I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to have Shawn on with us today. So he's going to talk a little bit about that, and he'll talk about some of the issues in California specifically, like PIP and no fault and MedPay. And he's going to give us a presentation. We'll interact a little bit. And I know that you are going to be very pleased that you've stuck with us and got this information. So Shawn, I want to thank you to our broadcast and thank you for participating with us. And before I just bring you on to start the show for you, I just want to say congratulations, because we were at the California Chiropractic Association and you wound up receiving an award from them. And I'm sure that it's one of many over the years for all of the work you've done on behalf of chiropractors. So thank you for doing what you do. And thanks for being with us.
Stu, these are kind and beautiful remarks. I really appreciate it. It's really from the heart, and it means a lot to me. I'm a son of a chiropractor, a grandnephew of a chiropractor, and many other chiropractors in our family. I'm the first lawyer, but it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to get straight to the work. First, we start off with the case that's been a conundrum and a challenge for every chiropractor I've ever known in every part of the country. We call it the MIST case, M-I-S-T. Allstate Insurance started a process called Colossus in the 1990s that has really taken the MIST case off the table and made it very unworkable if you're going to go to a superior court or a major court. The minor impact soft tissue, it's the greatest acronym in the world. It simply says if the accident is so small and the person's relatively young and the patient is relatively healthy, be careful. You take those cases, you work them up, you get a lot of bills, you get 30 or 40 visits in them, and most jurisdictions won't pay. Juries won't buy it. The logic is compelling. There are studies from very smart people in the chiropractic profession that show, of course, you can have dramatically terrible injuries with minor impacts, but they're rare, and the juries don't buy it. And so just from a practical point of view, I want to stress, be very cautious of the minor impact soft tissue case. But those patients, keep in mind, are not cheating. they're seeing you first because they're hurting. So just because the accident's small doesn't mean you ignore them. You can't do that. That's violation of the Hippocratic Oath. So the goal is that when the patient is hurting, you need in your evaluation, you need to find out how serious the impact was. And there's a very easy answer to this. Was your car drivable? And the next follow-up question, where is your car? And if it's in your parking lot, that's the biggest clue of all. It may be a miscase. Now you don't know until you actually physically look at it. And that's part of your medical examination, your evaluation. You take the patient outside with you, look at the car, and see if you can see the biomechanics that could have caused an undue stress that would require extensive care for the patient. Now, if you can't see it, nobody else can see it. And the patients, most of the time, will be quite honest, say, look, I know it's not a big accident, but my neck really hurts. Well, you have a duty and an obligation to take care of them. Maybe they have PIP, maybe they have med pay, and that's good. But as you know, in most states, most patients don't have PIP or med pay, which is terribly unfortunate. In California, for example, only 20% of all motorists in California, including nice neighborhoods, even have med pay. So the missed case is something that I always consider a cash patient. And believe me, personal injury and cash go together very nice. Take care of the patient. They get 6 visits, 30 days, move on. Lawyers won't touch these cases. If they take a case like this, you probably won't get paid anyhow. So it's just a word to the wise. We're talking about today about the moderate to severe impact. So I have 5 crucial steps that I'd like you to consider when it comes to a moderate to severe personal injury. And we're going to try to keep this right to the point, get to the heart of the matter so that you can get as much information. Now, keep in mind, there's going to be a lot of questions we don't answer, and you're welcome to contact us afterwards. But the 5 crucial steps, I want to start with number 1. Is your patient innocent? The era of no fault is out the window. You still have what we have in the Anglo-Saxon prudential history, is that if a person is hurt, the person that caused the damage is legally responsible. And that's true everywhere. And sometimes it seems intuitively correct, but many times patients will have an accident and they're not sure if they're innocent or not. Now, they may be in denial. And I've seen plenty of cases where the patient swore he was honest. You get the police report, and it turns out they were drunk and driving in a wrong way on a one-way street. So you got to be careful, because when you take a case, any case, and you don't get paid at the day of the service, then it's a risk, in my view. And so you want to minimize your risk. Even taking insurance is a risk. There's no 100% guarantee that Blue Shield, Blue Cross is going to pay you, but what they should pay you on a non-personal injury case or a workers' comp case. So I believe in minimizing your risk, and that takes some action on your part. To find out first if the patient's innocent, you do that very simply. It's not complicated. Always get the police report. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You get the police report, valuable information's on it, it's publicly available to you. And to save you a little bit of time, patients don't get the police report. Lawyers do. Get the police report from the lawyer. They'll send it to you for free and for fun. If they don't, in my view, the lawyer's got a problem, not you. And that also gives you some other reason to be a little bit concerned. Lawyers should always give you the police report. That settles it. And I never want you to read a police report more than a minute, because you don't have time. Just make sure this is what we call your guarantee that you got, quote, a good case and your patient is innocent. Step 2.
Hey, Shawn, I just want to ask you a question about that, because what comes to my mind is that if you are getting a patient in and they have an attorney, or you're referring them to an attorney, or perhaps they were referred to you, either which way, is that something that is automatic? The attorneys always get these and it's easy to request from the attorney?
It's unusual. Let's be honest. Most doctors never see a police report. I think that's a mistake, because then they're kind of taking a blind gamble that they're assuming what they heard is a good case. I don't like to gamble. But good lawyers will understand immediately, oh, this is a smart doctor. He wants to make sure it's a clean case. And so it's a nice way of testing how good the lien's going to be in the good faith of the attorney, isn't it? You ask him for a police report. He says, well, I can't give it to you. Maybe it's time to shop for a new attorney.
Yeah, or cut your losses sooner than later.
Yeah, and again, a lot of doctors get discouraged with personal injury cases because they make a couple of easy mistakes that can be corrected in the first couple of weeks of treatment. And you don't want to hold on to a case where you're just not going to get paid. Ultimately, nobody's happy. You're not happy, and the patient's not happy. Some of these cases, let's say it looks like it's a strong case. It's a big accident, let's say, but the police report is kind of muddled, or they actually turn against your patient. Well, you still take care of the patient, but you convert it from an insurance case to a cash patient case, and you leave it up to the patient. Now, the second step is how severe is the accident? And there's a real easy answer to that. If it's a big accident, you'll never see the patient's car. It won't be in the parking lot. That's pretty obvious. So you got to get the pictures. And you know what? Today with the cell phones, 80–90% of your patients have pictures sitting in their cell phone. Ask for it, download all of them. That's part of your chart. And the reason it's part of your chart is it goes to the impact and the biomechanics of how badly the patient was hurt. So it goes a long way. It might explain the stress in the left arm. It might explain the bruise on the right hip. There's lots of information pictures will actually provide that's needed for the diagnosis. So you get those pictures, no ifs, ands, or buts. Remember the miss case. Thirdly, we'd like to know how badly hurt is your patient. Remember, you don't control if the patient's innocent. You don't control how big the accident is. But you become the chief player, the quarterback of the case is diagnosing the patient. And this is where a lot of doctors drop the ball. They give us a weak diagnosis, what looks like a low-level injury. They talk about cervicalgia, lumbago. It's embarrassing. These are terms that our grandparents use, but it's not a good, active, smart diagnosis that stresses the mechanics and the seriousness of the trauma. Remember, trauma is something that very few doctors, medical doctors, ever encounter. Who does trauma? Emergency room docs, orthopedists, and chiropractors. Those are that's about 80% of the market. There's some other specialists that do trauma, but the trauma cases are something that chiropractors have more experience with than most medical doctors. You can have an MD spends his entire life and never sees a trauma case, wouldn't know how to handle it. The chiropractors are different. And oftentimes folks don't understand or appreciate that, but we do in personal injury. Lawyers that I know that don't like chiropractors need chiropractors because they're the ones that actually see the patients. Patients are opting to go to the chiropractor first, no matter what people tell them, because they want the non-medical approach. They don't want to go with expensive tests. They don't want to go with the surgical approach, and they certainly don't want the drugs. I have found that patients more than ever on auto cases are going to chiropractors, and that's really confounds a lot of lawyers, confounds medical doctors, and I love it. But the diagnosis is what's in your hands, and let's have some examples of what we can do. If you give us a diagnosis that's called a low-level trauma diagnosis, you've really basically boxed yourself out and you made it a small case. For example, you might be able to get 12 visits justified and the insurance company will pay it. So if you put down cervicalgia, don't expect to get care for more than a month. Well, there's more. We got some codes that I'm very much into discussing codes. We have long, extensive seminars about this, but I'll give you a couple of tips here. Let's look at the first one, the new pain codes. I call it new. They've been around for about 15 years. But the AMA discovered pain as a code, as an ICD-10 code many years ago, 15 years ago, but it's something chiropractors have known about. In my view, if you're not using a G8911 or a G8954, you really don't have a patient that really requires much chiropractic care. I think these are crucial diagnoses that should be in every single report if your patient suffers chronic or acute pain due to trauma. These are powerful, and it signals to Colossus, to the artificial intelligence systems that are reviewing your bills. Remember, people don't look at your bills anymore. It's computers that are looking at your bills and judging to see the quality of the evidence, judging to see if this is a serious mechanism of injury that you've justified. Let's move over to neck pain. Well, this is a Sam Collins approach, and I like it a lot. First, if you've got a neck problem with a patient, be very specific about it. So the S16 1XXA, the fascial neck muscle strain, is very effective in the ICD-10, but you got to go further. Neck strain doesn't cut it anymore. You got to go deeper. There's radiculopathy or kyphosis, or spinal enthesopathy. These are powerful drivers that drive the value up. Colossus, adjusters, insurance companies have to give you more money. And that's just a fact of life. And I'm spending my life trying to get doctors to upcode and give us some really good, powerful, accurate measurements of the degree of trauma. Kyphosis is something chiropractors have known about 100 years, ever since the Palmers started using x-rays in the 1920s. We've known about kyphosis. It's an active, clear-cut, unbiased documentation of a severe neck injury, and yet I don't ever see that in most reports, and it's something that really needs to be added, because we take x-rays, we see that what's going on with the neck, patient can't move. Well, that's a pretty much very likely to be a trauma-caused problem. Now, my favorite area when it comes to trauma are headaches, because they're so specific and real and that juries can identify. And again, there's over 100 codes. I just put a few here that describe different trauma-related headache pains. And go to the ICD-9, have a look at it, underline it, because every patient that comes in, it's not a transient 24-hour headache for many of them. Many of them, it's persistent, it's daily, it goes on for months. It may go on for years, long after you've discontinued care. So you really want to get into the weeds on headache pain and get the appropriate one. Again, look at the bottom two for headache pain, G44-319, G44-329. Some patients will have acute post-traumatic that lasts for weeks, appropriate diagnosis, or worse than that, it's chronic that even continues after you release them from care. And a lot of chiropractors don't want to think that their patients still have problems, but the reality is trauma changes many lives, and many times it's a lifetime sentence for patients. And chiropractors are only given a few months to care for people, not the years and years they used to have when in our grandparents' age. So nowadays, because of insurance, the way it works and how they limit it, you get a few months. And you know what? If you get your patients 80% post-accident, 90% post-accident, you're doing a heck of a good job, but they're still going to be suffering many times for years thereafter. Well,
Shawn, before you go on, I just want to add in something that I think is essential for the doctors to understand from what you were saying. These patients may have ongoing issues, and we as chiropractors may think that they should be under a lifetime of care based on that injury. And maybe they should, but that's not necessarily what the reality of the insurance world is. And the patient at some point is going to need to be educated as to how things work, so that they can have their own informed decision about continuing on far beyond a claim on their auto accident. Am I being accurate on that?
Well spoken, Dr. Hoffman. Some patients enjoy the chiropractic experience so much, they rightfully believe it's healthy for them. But again, the rules and personal injury is pretty specific and pretty clear. You've got to bring them to pre-accident status. So if they have a pre-existing condition like we see on the slide right in front of us, if they have pre-existing scoliosis, advanced cervical disc degeneration, diabetes, pre-accident surgery, or they've been on this planet for a long time, or like this guy, on the couch and eating potato chips, they're going to have ongoing issues for the rest of their life. And chiropractic can do a great deal of benefits. I, of course, have my monthly chiropractic visits, if I'm in pain or not. And the point is, I like to stay as healthy as possible. Well, if you got pre-existing diabetes and scoliosis, you're having problems before the accident. These, what we call these are complicating factors. They're value drivers. They make the case much actually bigger. Insurance companies like to say, well, your patient needed all that care because they had diabetes. We turn it on its head. We say, well, they needed all that care because their diabetic condition made them much slower to heal, and their scoliosis made them much more difficult to care for. So, of course, they needed much more care. We don't lose those battles in courts, and insurance companies understand that. So these are value drivers, but the patient at the same time has to understand that the care to them is going to be limited. It's not going to be a full-time comprehensive forever. And most of them know that intuitively. Most of our patients are middle class. They don't have time to spend at the doctor's office anyhow. So they do need to be educated, and certainly the lawyer, a good lawyer, will explain it to them that they get months, not years, in the vast majority of the cases. Well, let's go to step 4. We're getting near the close here, and step 4 is something that is kind of a mystery for a lot of doctors of chiropractic. I've been teaching this for some time. I teach at Southern California University of Health Science, and I also teach at Palmer West. And prognosis is something that we should own. And this is, we have, I feel like I'm swimming uphill, Dr. Hoffman, because prognosis tells the insurance company what is going to be happening to the patient in the future after you release them from care. And some patients may be facing a knee replacement. That's a big deal. And so you gotta put that down. Some patients will have traumatic brain injury that'll last for years that need a lot of counseling. We know a lot about traumatic brain injuries from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So that's a whole new vast area that chiropractors should own, diagnose, and help with, and bring in the appropriate specialist. So the prognosis is an entire separate category in the PI report. And what I would do is, if you have, let's say, 8 active SMART diagnoses, there should be 8 SMART prognoses saying, well, given that there's a serious muscle strain to the neck and there's cervical radiculopathy, our prognosis is that the patient probably improves in the next 6 months, but may need to be reviewed and reevaluated at that time, even though they've had a full course of chiropractic care. Or the patient, because of continuing problems, care will be transferred to, let's say, a neurosurgeon if it's one of those rare extreme cases. But the prognosis explains to the reader, to the insurance company, to the judge, to the jury, to anybody reviewing the case, this patient's not out of the woods. And the vast majority of our patients in a serious trauma case will have lifetime problems. Put it on paper. It's true, it's ethical, and it's important. Well, again, a couple of ideas here. This is what a prognosis could look like. Not every diagnosis is a problem. They will get resolved. Look at indigestion. A real diagnosis, resolved. Those usually last a few days. Gait, abnormal gait, many times resolved. But the right wrist pain, the continuing headaches, the continued neck pain, many times you get the patient up to 70, 50%. It depends on your experience, your first examination, and of course, I believe in a final examination when you release the patient. And you simply state what the future care looks like. Those are huge on creating a greater value for the personal injury case. Lawyers will love you, and it's something that's terribly important. Well, finally, we come to one of my favorite areas. We're spending a lot of time in this, the patient's disabilities, and I put that in plural. Disabilities is big bucks in a PI case. So I want to be very clear and blunt about it. The insurance companies always owe for the medical bills, fair enough. They also owe for pain and suffering. They also owe for emotional distress. So that's the old model, but we're adding on disabilities because that's an extra value on top of those 3 components. So here are the big 3 when it comes to disabilities. The patient's loss of earnings, big deal. In most states, the insurance companies have to pay the gross loss of earnings. So you got a worker, a blue collar guy that making $1,000 a week in a factory, and he's off for 4 weeks. You can figure it out. It's $4,000. And it's a lawyer's job to do the economics. Your job is simply to write down and simply say, clear cut, the patient's off work for 4 weeks because of the injuries received from the auto accident. If you don't put that down in your chart and your report, even if I have a letter from the employer, I can't get the money. It's your duty to measure and actually to approve of the patient's not ability to work. There's other ways of looking at that. Sometimes they have to work part-time and not full-time. That's the kind of documentation you do because the patients are losing money when they're not working. That's very specific, and insurance carriers have to pay to the penny. But the other one is non-work. And that's what we call the activities of daily living. Let's have a look at that. The activities of daily living, we try to make it real simple here. The ADLs is something that we all know about, but it becomes a kind of a Jane Austen novel. You can get really lost into the forest trying to figure out, well, what's a measurable ADL, what's useful. And so one of my students came up with this approach, this form, and make it real simple. Many patients will fill out the ADL forms in your office, and they'll list 30 things, 10 things, a whole bunch of things that they can't do as well as they used to during the care they're getting. Instead, we decided to get the 3 best: getting dressed, driving, and walking for this particular patient. How much time they were not able to work. And 4 weeks, 2 weeks. Now we're getting some metrics here. Degree of disability, use the pain scale. And that puts it right there. You don't need to even comment on it. You don't need to say it was hard getting dressed because the leg hurt and there were tightening of the muscles in the neck. You don't need to do that. Just give us this chart, and it's pretty clear cut. It's backed up in the ADL charts that the patient has already filled out. I'd like to do those ADL charts every 30 days while they're getting their monthly evaluation with you. And that's the evidence you need. And then you give me a real simple example like this to attach it to your report, and you look like a rock star. Well,
and Shawn, even the documentation itself, as you're well aware, we're dealing with how doctors should document and get paid and all of that, and that's terrific. But we are always concerned about what happens if something goes wrong and they get sued, the doctor, because some of these people are already litigious people. And the documentation will not only get you paid, it will not only protect your patient for getting what's rightfully theirs in the insurance world, but it's going to protect you as the doctor. And that is important as well. And so many doctors that we speak to do not go to the lengths that you're talking about, Shawn. And you've made it so simple through this presentation to document each step of the way. I encourage all of you to take this very seriously, because this documentation is simple and it will protect you while getting you paid as well as protecting your patient.
Yeah, I think that's, I understand how busy a chiropractor is. I grew up in a chiropractic household. I know what the stresses are: patients coming in late, staff getting sick, problems with the bathroom. I'm running a business. Half the time you're trying to keep all the balls up in the air, and then some lawyer wants you to write a report. Oh my God! Then they want you to read this and know this. And my methodology is one of extreme practicality, minimal use of your time, maximum value of the input that you put in a personal injury case, so that it's a happy reward, so that everybody's pleased. The patient realizes that you really do care about them. For example, looking at that ADL chart, activities of daily living, I mean, you really get to know the patient well. Talking about the patient's headaches. When's the last time any doctor that you know of actually wrote down about the patient's headaches? And that's a big issue for a lot of people. And to go into that kind of a degree and depth, and it doesn't take a lot of your physical time to do that and have a very happy patient with that. I agree that the documentation, here's my belief. If you do well on the personal injury case and the patient has a great settlement, you've got a patient and her family for the rest of your career. And my experiences, Dr. Stu, is that I don't know of a good personal injury doctor that's ever been sued by a patient. Patients are happy, they're pleased, they know they got great service, and there's no reason for them to be upset. So the good news is it's a low risk situation, extremely low, almost non-existent if you care about the patients. That's the bottom line.
And let me give you an example on the opposite side. Because just this morning, I took a call from one of our doctors who did not have that rapport with the patient, and maybe did, maybe didn't have adequate documentation. I haven't seen it yet. But because of things that the doctor was going through, he was requested from this patient to send out her records. Well, it took him 3 weeks to get to it. And that really irritated the patient, who already probably did not have that rapport with the doctor. And so she decided to go online and make a complaint to the licensing board. And she did. But in that complaint, it wasn't just about the time it took for the records, because when I looked it up, he had 30 days, according to his state rules and regulations, to get them out. And even though it should have been done promptly, it still was within that range. But she added to that there was sexual misconduct activity now, because she described his side posture adjustment, and to her, without communication and already being irritated at the doctor, that was a sexual move. And she didn't really want to come in anyway. The doctor was making her come in. Well, all of this, from what you've described, Shawn, seems like it could have all been nipped in the bud had there been proper communication from the beginning, as well as documenting for her and the insurance company that would also be going to an attorney, and it would all be prepared and ready to answer any response to a licensing board. All of it could have been taken care of right up front had this been taken care of the way you've presented.
Dr. Stu, you are so accurate on so many levels, and I have had some sad experiences where something's going on in a doctor's life and they're not getting the report done. And that's why I believe in a really easy, streamlined report. But keep that in mind. We have a rule around here. When it looks like it's a tough situation, it's a problem, it looks like it's going to take time and the patient's getting angrier and angrier, we call it the first thing you do in the morning is swallow the frog. Get the biggest challenge off the table, and many times you'll make the patient a strong ally when they can tell you're going out of your way. So you can't we're professionals. Everybody has personal issues. No human being doesn't have stresses and challenges outside of work. And what we do as professionals is that we focus on the patients, and if they want a simple piece of paper or they want to see a report get out the door, you do everything you can. That's what keeps you in business. That's what gets new patients. But most importantly, that's what decreases the stress in your life. Well, you know, the example you cited was so gratuitously unnecessary. Having that as part of the record for other potential patients to see, and the hassles, and you have to think about it, totally unwarranted. So again, swallow the frog is a good philosophy.
I like it.
Well, thanks very much. This has been a lot of fun. And Dr. Stu, it's a great honor to be with your network, your organization. You've been very successful helping doctors for decades now. I believe passionately about personal injury. We will answer any chiropractor's problem. All they got to do is email me, but only on personal injury. Don't ask me about workers' comp. Don't ask me about immigration law. I'm not interested in divorce. I think it's a bad idea. It's very expensive. Criminal law, I'll probably plea you up. But when it comes to personal injury, that's our science. That's our philosophy. We love doing it, and especially suing insurance companies. Lots of fun.
And Shawn, before we go, I wanted to just ask you a question or two, because some of the questions that I get, and I loved your disclaimer just now, I should be utilizing that for myself. But some of the questions that we do get are, what about liens? Is an attorney obligated to honor the lien? We've had, doctors that deal with attorneys that aren't you. And I know your integrity and how you work, but not everybody works the same. So we know that on the chiropractic end. We also know it on the legal end. And when an attorney starts going to the chiropractor and saying, well, we need to settle this case, and I'll give you, 20 cents on a dollar, and the chiropractor bucks that, well, then they start to strong arm them. Well, your records weren't good. Your board is not going to like that, or this or that. And, I'm not the type of person that likes to take that from anybody. So I generally don't, but I also make sure that my ducks are in a row. And if the doctor has a lien with the attorney, what does that do to protect the doctor themselves?
You're asking the ultimate question. And in a nutshell, we have 50 different states with 50 different sets of rules. One time I actually did a study on this for the National Association of Chiropractic Attorneys. California has a pretty good value on that, and many states follow suit. The lien agreement is a contract that's binding. And it's been the lien agreement is not something designed just for chiropractors. It's designed for all sorts of businesses worldwide. And it's something that's recognized in all 50 states. But some are enforced better than others. Lien agreements, it always has to be signed by the attorney, or basically you're probably working for free. You'd be surprised. Some doctors forget it. They get a new staff member. They weren't trained in what a lien agreement is. So they'll have a dozen cases or so without signed agreements from the lawyers. So when the case is ready to be paid out, the doctor doesn't have a letter protecting their right to get paid. And nobody wants to sue the patient. Dr. Stu, you don't want your doctor suing the patient, because when you sue a patient on a PI case, a good percentage of them are going to sue you for some made-up malpractice claim, and then that's really not good. So it's critical. But more important than the lien agreement is the trust and the reputation of the attorney you're working with. And I have a four-point skunk test. When you bring a brand new attorney, he comes into your life, he's handling one of your patients. How do you find out if the attorney's going to burn you or not? Wouldn't you like to have a formula, a checklist? And so here's the formula. Number one, does he sign a lien? That's simple. You'd be surprised the number of attorneys that won't even sign it. And by the way, this test, all 4 points, you get an A or an F. There's no C pluses or B minuses. If he doesn't sign a lien, he's an enemy. You don't work with them. You tell a patient to get a new lawyer or their cash. That's real simple, because you can't, you're not running a free clinic, right? Number two, that the attorney has to actually agree to give you information about the case. So again, the attorney is going to give you a police report. He'll give you pictures of the accident. He'll get you the ER records because he can get them right away. If he doesn't do that, or if he gives you excuses, or he talks about privacy, which is not true, then he's lying, and so he gets an F. And again, if you get an F, time to tell a patient. And by the way, you find all this out in the first few days of the PI case. You don't need to wait for 9 months. The third area is on the insurance. Is he going to intercept your PIP or your MedPay or not? Any lawyer that takes your MedPay or PIP is a crook. There's no ethical justification for it at all. And about half the lawyers take it. They think they're entitled to taking the patient's own personal health insurance money and putting it in the trust account. Not true. It's unethical, but it's not illegal. And so if they start taking your money, or they tell you you can't bill the patient's insurance directly, bad lawyer, stay away from them. They're poison. And now the fourth test is real simple. When you talk to the PI lawyer, you ask them the all-important question. You ask them, who is your chiropractor? Now, the responses will be amazing. Some lawyers will say, look, I don't need a chiropractor. I'm feeling perfectly good. Now, since when does a 45-year-old male never had a back catastrophe? We know every 10 years, most human beings have a back catastrophe, and if they're not, and they're seeing some kind of a help, they're getting some kind of help, some kind of a physician help. But if they're not seeing a chiropractor and they're getting prednisone or some medical care, you can't trust them. And here's what's ironic. Their own patients are seeing chiropractors, not medical doctors, and yet the attorney himself will not see a chiropractor, and he's a personal injury lawyer. Are you kidding me? So it shows that he really doesn't have good views on chiropractic, doesn't believe in chiropractic. I don't know how you can work with the person that doesn't agree and share your philosophy. So don't ask them what you think about chiropractic, because then you'll get nonsense. Ask them who is their chiropractor. And that's basically you're trying to get a reference on him. So I think that's a 4-point step. I say that works to let you know if you're going to get screwed or not by a PI attorney 87.5% of the time if they pass all 4 tests.
That's awesome. I like the 4-point plan on this. And when you're talking about that, it makes me think that is the perfect mechanism, because so many doctors want more new patients, want more personal injury cases coming from attorneys rather than, hit or miss. And it seems like the plan you just laid out would be the perfect marketing plan, that when you get a patient that comes in that has an attorney already that you don't even know, it would be an opportunity to call them up and say, hey, can we have lunch? Let's talk about this case. And at that point, you now create an ally rather than someone that's going to always be going against you, at least hopefully so.
No, that's true, by the way. When you do that 4-point test and they're passing them, yeah, they sign the lien, they send you the police report, you do want to talk to a new attorney. And you get them on the phone, and let's say, no, I've never seen a chiropractor. That's an opportunity to say, would you like to come to my office and see what we get done here, how we get people well? That attorney that says yes, you made a friend for life. He'll be your patient, and you're going to get a lot more referrals. The attorney says, I don't need chiropractic. Well, he's somebody who's dodgy, and I wouldn't trust him. It's a real simple test.
And if they are communicating back and forth with you, it would be my encouragement to not go in for the kill. There's a lot of chiropractors that these attorneys deal with. They don't have to be your patient. It would be nice to know that they're chiropractic friendly, but don't overdo it, because that turns people off at the same time when you know you're dealing with a certain group.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes you get a younger attorney that doesn't have many connections, and he's trying to make a network himself. You can make a friend for life that way. But I think it's always a good idea to let them know that you welcome, basically being inspected. You welcome people to see your office, and they don't even have to treat. Sometimes they'll do it voluntarily. I remember when I was a young attorney and I walked in Dr. Tannenbaum's office, and before I knew it, he had me on the table. He just loved to adjust, and he was so effective, and it really was quite an awakening for me. So it's those it's those welcoming doctors that you have long-term relationships.
Well, Shawn, this has been so informative for the doctors. I really want to first and foremost thank you. I think that what you laid out was so simplistic, and I do want to overemphasize to the doctors that let's remember, we're talking about a specific type of case here. This isn't talking about lifetime care based on the vertebral subluxation complex and families and infants and all of that. We talk plenty about all of that, but we can't get away from the fact that there's a whole population out there that are in auto accidents all day long, and we are the rightful place for these people to go and get the best help available in most of the cases. Why aren't we doing a better job not only attracting them, but documenting and taking care of them and communicating with them along with the attorneys, and utilizing that as one of our business models to earn a good income at the same time? It only makes sense. So you've made that so crystal clear, and I just want to send some appreciation out to you, because we work with some of the same people in the profession, and I know, again, your reputation precedes you. So we're going to give everybody information how to get in touch with you directly, but I know you speak around the country, and it's very easy to find you. And for those doctors in California, certainly find Shawn and make sure you have an ally over there. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.